Hello and welcome to the Fellowship Phase, an Adventures in Middle-earth podcast. I'm Josh and that's Callum. We're going to give you inside information on how to find your own path through Tolkien's world.
Éomer and Aragorn leant wearily on their swords. Away on the left, the crash and clamour of the battle on the rock rose loud again, but the Hornburg still held fast, like an island in the sea. Its gates lay in ruin, but over the barricade of beams and stones within no enemy as yet had passed.
What a moment
Oh
in
my
the
God.
story. What a moment in the films. Just Helm's Deep is, it's one of my very favourite just moments in storytelling.
In cinema, in anything. The rain, like, oh my God. I feel like watching those DVD extras about Helm's Deep and they talk about what an
How they did
ordeal
it.
it was, a month of night filming, being wet. It must have been miserable, but, you know, kudos to all those actors and everybody involved in that production because, oh my God, was it worth it. I think Lord of
was
the Rings
incredible.
shows that, like, you know, making things as real as possible really adds to cinema.
It
CGI.
really does. And actually rewatching them now, I know they've been remastered, but even watching the non-remastered ones, the Helm's Deep scenes in particular hold up so well.
Amazing.
As
Absolute
epic
goosebumps.
battles. It really harkens back to, like Golden Age of Hollywood when they did, big classical ancient
The
Roman
Napoleon.
Greek, and they would do like with a cast of thousands, but it gave you the scale. Helm's
Yeah.
Deep absolutely does that.
Yeah. Well, if you want to try and emulate that sense of scale and epicness in your Lord of the Rings role-playing game adventure, then how would you do it?
Yes. How would we do it? We're going to have another go at using a moment from the books to try and quickly come up with the structure for how an encounter would work. We did it with the Burnt Glade, with the wargs and the Hobbit party. Ultimately, that was quite a straightforward encounter to create. It's reasonably kind of limited in its scope. This is completely the other end of the scope. A host of 10,000 Uruks.
Less than half what I'd hoped for. I've made that reference so many times.
You have, and I love it. Loads of incredibly powerful NPCs, effectively. Like you've got Theoden there, you've got some of the elves there. We know that
Or
Gandalf
are they the player
arrives.
characters in the situation?
Perhaps they're the player characters in the situation. Yes, but there would be a lot of NPCs.
Yes, there are a lot of NPCs around. And whether you go book or you go film version, if there's elves there or if there is, more Men of Rohan, then, there's a lot going on. It's a really busy, big scale. And there's lots of different ways you could try and transmit that sense of scale without having an absolute meltdown as you try and roll attacks for 10,000 orcs. That's not going to work. You
I
can't
have
put every single thing on the battle map.
You can't. I have an idea of how I might go around starting it. What about you? Do you have a sense of how you would do it? I'd be interested to know if you've come up with a similar idea.
Yeah, I think, I guess we're talking about something that we're very clear, but I guess if you were making something from scratch, which was similar to Helm's Deep, I think for me, again, as in the last one, I would be trying to think about what the motivations and narrative, what makes sense. So here I'm thinking the Men of Rohan, they know that there's help on its way. So in the film, that's Éomer and his Eadred, Eored? I can't remember the right name, but his host of riders.
Yes.
In the books, it's Erkenbrand and the men of the Westfold who are going to come. And so it's about holding out. We know that there's hope. It's about survival. It's about, keeping going, holding back. It's an unwinnable situation, but it's about survival, buying time till the dawn on the third day. And for the Urukai is the extermination of mankind, or all living things. And it's not as thought through. It's not a clever plan. It's go and destroy. Perhaps there's leadership in there, but it's not clever. And they've got like arcane power with Isengard, for what Saruman's made. But the motivations is where I probably would start with that. Like, what
Yep.
is it that they're trying to do? And then I would move into what's the terrain. So barren valley, there's walls. I think this is much better described in the film than it is in the book. But we've got the Deeping Wall, which is newer, and then we've got Helm's Deep, which is stronger. There's a tower. So having a very clear idea of my head of like where's the strengths and weaknesses of the area that they're fighting in. What can I present to my players as options? Because I want to be able to give them like if there's a bit of planning, and I know that my group of players love like planning session where they get to prepare something. So I would be thinking for this, I'm thinking, what details can I give them? Can I get them to do some skill checks before the battle to be like, the Deeping Wall is really weak. There's a big, water entrance into it. Oh, maybe we can block that up. Whoops. So yeah, I'd be thinking about the terrain, and then what was it? What would we say last time? I think after that, I'd be thinking about, what's the outcomes going to be. So, if they lose parts of the battle, what does that mean? How does it affect? And just trying to like tie out some mechanics. And I guess, and I feel like I'm just speaking here, so I'm going to just keep going to give my thoughts, and then I'll
go give your thoughts.
Is I wouldn't try and run 10,000 Urukai and several thousand men. I think it's impossible. And I also wouldn't try and like put them into like hordes, like a big stat block. I think that like if you try and make it really, really crunchy, it's really hard to know how that's going to work, and then it might not work how you wanted it to, and it's not going to feel bad. So you're going to have to abstract in some way. And what I think is you have the sense of scale and epicness and size by describing things that are happening off camera, I guess, in quotation marks. And then you boil down, and you see this in the films, and they're really good, and in the books as well, you focus on little moments. So you say like, okay, before they get to plan, they get to decide where they are stationed on the walls, what they're going to be doing in the battle, and you give them the opportunity to decide how they want to approach this big situation. And then you zoom in on that bit, and you say, okay, right, you've decided that Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are going to be up in the Deeping Wall leading the attack there. So we're going to go there. And then, maybe some other player characters like Theoden's at the gate, so we're going to jump over there. And you maybe intertwine them, or you do them separately, or however you want to do, and you really nail down like what does success and failure at those bits mean.
Yes.
It's not just like, oh, you lost, you're all dead. It's more like, you get a sense of saying like, oh, the Deeping Wall is overwhelmed, so you should probably retreat now. So you can make that clear to your players. But maybe it's like how many rounds that they hold on gives them a bonus somewhere else, or it's more about how many NPCs survive there, so they like have opportunities to save people. So then you get more fighters in the next segment. And the inspiration I have for that is that in the Middle Earth strategy battle game, they have narrative campaigns. So they'll take you through, like there's War in Rohan, for example, which takes you through like stuff that's leading up to this. And after each battle, depending if the good or evil player won, then the next battle is influenced by that, which I think is a really nice way of saying like abstracting out like in a big battle, in an epic encounter, there will be small bits, and the whole massive battle is made up of small encounters, and each of those matter. So that's how I would do it, trying to break it down into modules that then interact with other things. And so it feels like the players have agency without, and they have an effect on what's going on without it feeling like overwhelmingly massive and like they can't influence anything.
Yeah. This is fascinating because your conclusion is almost the same as mine, but I came at it from a very different direction.
I love that.
So you're right. I often quite like to, and I think it comes down to the fact that ultimately all I want to do is run horror RPGs. Like I love running horror RPGs, which is very much about creating a particular tone and a particular sense for the play, one of fear and excitement or dread, whatever. So even when I'm doing something that's not horror, I often think like, well, what kind of emotional response is it that I want my players to be able to enjoy that this encounter gives them? And I think with a battle with tens of thousands of people, I'm thinking of the moment when in the film when they're in Isengard and Wormtongue is speaking to uh, Saruman, talking about Helm's Deep and how there's no force in all of Middle Earth that's large enough to take this fortification, and then they go outside of Orthanc, and you can see that. And as the like, I remember watching it in the cinema, and it was epic. It was huge. That is the sense I want the players to have, this kind of moment of awe of like, this is bigger than anything we've experienced, bigger than anything I could almost imagine. That's the sense. The immediate problem, like you said, was that is completely unmanageable if you ran the game like you would normally run an encounter. It would stop being awe-inspiring, and it would be ridiculously a war of attrition and dice and numbers, and it would lose all flavor. So I would then think, right, what I need to do is I need to be able to break it down into manageable chunks and also give the players the sense of the overall picture. So all the time, keep coming back to narrating the big scene, when in reality, each of the players or each of the groups of the players are actually only really interacting with a chunk of it. You mentioned agency, and I think that's really important. It matters that what the players do matters. So it's fine to break it down into manageable chunks as long as whether the players fail and succeed has a meaningful effect on. What you can't do is just decide to narrate a battle and they play along, but their role is meaningless. That is not fun at all. I think because we're not going to run 10,000 Uruks, there's different ways of doing it. One is almost you don't treat them as enemies at all, not enemies, monsters at all, like with hit points. And what you're actually doing when your players make attacks is really you're tracking successes and failures. Now, you could tell them this explicitly. You could say, there are an unkillable number of these enemies. But what we're really doing here is if you take the attack action on your turn and you succeed or you fail against a stat block, we're basically totting up success and failure. And that's the kind of tides of battle. You could do it that way. And I'm kind of thinking about almost like the way that video games do this. They have a similar problem. Certainly in the past they did, which is that there was a limited number of things they could have in the world at any one time. They couldn't have infinite numbers of enemies that you were fighting. What they would often do, I'm thinking of I think one of the Medal of Honor Allied Assault, when they do the storming the beaches of Normandy, there was
epic reference. I love that game.
Amazing game.
Such a good game.
They want to capture the feeling of the storming of the beaches. But again, that was tens of thousands of people. The game, I mean, that was years ago, was not in a position to have that many. What they actually did was they kind of quietly gated you in a section which was populated with things for you to interact with. And you could see things that were happening outside this section. You couldn't actually interact with them. That was really just a kind of moving backdrop. And actually you were presented with a chunk of the beach and some enemies. And I think that's what I would do. I would treat them in these, I would give them small maps, whether it's part of the wall or a gate or something, and we would do the combat there with some enemies. And you would just keep describing the big battle, and depending on how they're doing, swing the battle one way or another. The other thing got me thinking was I used to always read the Games Workshop magazine White Dwarf when I was a kid. Before I could afford to buy all the minis because they're very expensive, I used to read all their battle reports. And every year or so, they used to have a big, they did like a big campaign event, and they normally released some kind of new book around it. There was one year where they had this huge epic campaign, which was it was Warhammer 40,000. Fleet of orcs was attacking this system, and all the different good, if there are any good factions in Warhammer 40,000, came together to defend the city. Now, again, they wanted to capture the feeling of like a horde of enemies, like an unimaginable horde. But in a mini game or a miniature game, that's not practical. What they did for the battle report was they created 4 battles that they ran at once. They had one big table which had a city map and 2 players on each side, and then they had 3 like satellite tables, each of which was kind of one was uh, it was the wastes, I think, outside the city. One was a an orbital bombardment ship, and the other one was, I think it was, anti-aircraft guns. And the outcome of the satellite games affected the big game. So if the orcs managed to break through their vehicles through the defense on the planes, they got extra units on the big map. Or if the Space Marines managed to defeat the spaceship, then they didn't use artillery. Or if they defeated the anti-aircraft, you got planes. So it's big battle in the middle, but the small things added extra things in, which gave scale, but was still manageable. Basically, each thing was still just a normal game. So I think what you could do is you could almost have described the whole battle, and then maybe have 2 or 3 maps of just a section, and you could maybe deploy 1 or 2 of the characters in them, and you could zoom into the section, and so you do a few rounds of Aragorn fighting some Uruks off the wall, and depending on what happens, that affects a different section, and all the players feel like their bit matters, but you're never really dealing with more than a few things at once. I think that's probably how I would run it.
I love that idea, and also I really want to play that Warhammer 40k game. I don't play Warhammer 40k, and I've never really played it. But just the description of that, sometimes people describe so. I remember when I had like a summer job, someone described a game called Europa Universalis Free, and they talked about like their experience playing it, and I was absolutely like captivated. Went off and bought the game, and fell in love with it. And sometimes it is that feeling that you get a glimpse when someone describes something. So yeah, let's go play 40k. But the multi-part battle, I think it's the same. Yeah, we're coming at the same thing from slightly different ideas, but I think that's kind of, you almost have to do that. Like, I guess the other option is, do you just run the whole battle? And I don't know. So in Middle-earth strategy battle game, the sort of Lord of the Rings Warhammer, there's rules for like massive encounters, and I have tried it, and I have to say I don't find it as fun as just the smaller battles, like the skirmish games, where there's less minis and there's less going on, because I just find it gets bogged down. And I think, there's there's strategies that we talked about in the Siege of Stoneyford in terms of strategies to stop a big encounter bogging down. Like, you can give control of the friendly NPCs in blocks to players. You can, streamline how you roll. So set up roll 20 to auto roll damage, roll all at once, or you can sort of take one roll for all, one group of enemy, you'll go in one roll, for example. So there's things that you can do to like make it quicker to run lots of NPCs, both friendly and unfriendly. But I think that sort of level of detail isn't required for the feeling of epicness. And that comes less so from having 100 tokens on a map, which is just a bit boring, I think. And more from how you describe. So maybe when you're planning it, you say on turn order 20, you have descriptions that you've written down in advance based on outcomes of other things, or you have like we sort of layer actions is a thing in 5th edition. The monsters can have legendary actions, so have those take effect. So you can say like, this is happening in the part of the battle, it has this abstract effect here, and as long as that makes sense, I think that can capture the idea that stuff going on. Or they can even see like epic, say they are in Aragorn and like Glass and Gimli in this setting, or we're doing another big battle, that's not in the book, and we're talking about that. And then what's happening. So the moment in our campaign, I won't say too much because we're going through it in order, but like there's a big battle sort of encounter happening, and how I prepped that was I prepped several different maps based on like basically we did a planning session where you got to prepare, and I used that to decide how the maps are going to look because you adjusted stuff, and I kind of had already planned what the enemies were going to do, so anything you did wasn't going to change that. So they had a plan, and then sort of tried to put in challenges that weren't directly related to that. So like really thought clearly about what the people were doing. So
Yes.
maybe if you're doing like the attack on Minas Tirith, it's the fact that for some unknown reason the women and children haven't been evacuated from the lower level. So you have to rescue them.
What? Like, why? Why is that not
Why have they
happening?
not been evacuated? They had a
I don't
lot of time to
understand.
prepare. Get them out. Why were they there? Why were they there? They should have
The
been
army was
evacuated long
invisible
ago.
for a long time. Faramir told, who knows?
Sorry, that was a
Yeah,
tangent.
no, I agree. It's something I get angry about as well. On the whole, like epic scale thing and getting bogged down, I agree, and I think that's because the game is designed, or all games, but the game is designed for a particular thing, which is to be heroic and to be zoomed in on a single character, which lends itself to skirmishes and
Yeah, and it's all
character-focused
about
action.
journeys. It's not
It's all
about
the
the
journey.
specific encounters, really.
Exactly. I am very low, and I've been thinking about this a lot because we're coming to the end of Curse of Strahd. I'm very loathed when you come to epic moments, which you want as the DM, you and players as well. You want to be the best moments of the game. You want the big, momentous moments to be the most fun. And I think some video games do this very well, and some do it very badly. And that is that when it comes to an epic moment, some game designers pivot to let's use different rules for this bit, and I hate that because
Oh,
I'm like, but you've given us like these rules which we love, and I want to celebrate them in the biggest moment. What I don't want is to be like, oh, now that you're doing this, you're gonna use this slightly worse designed rule set
yeah, like
to
press
make it feel
X to
epic. I'm like,
attack.
yeah, and I'm like,
It's like it just turns
no,
into a video, or it's a cutscene. That's the worst thing
yeah,
in the
oh.
game.
So in this, rather than turning it into like a real-time strategy battle game where it's like that could be fun, but it's like that's not why I'm playing this game. No, I want to keep focused on my character. So give us a series of smaller maps with a couple of enemies that we fight with a very clear objective of hold the gate, um, seal the wall, push some ladders away, get the women and children into the caves, for instance. They're kind of small objectives within the bigger objective. Do small maps, and when you've completed the goal or failed, that has an impact on the overall battlefield. And I think that it means you're still playing the same game. It's just as a lore master, you're tying up a much bigger narrative.
So we've taught you through a epic encounter, and we've used Helm's Deep as inspiration. And actually, something we've not mentioned, which I think is really important, is the weather. So in the
Yes.
film, the rain is a big part of the atmosphere and the feeling there. And I think it's easy to forget about because we just forgot about it there. But maybe that has some impact on abilities or some other stuff that's going on. So don't forget about the weather. So, for Helm's Deep, I guess, we're thinking that there's a sense of hopelessness. They have to hold on for dawn, that might be enough. They're trying to buy time. They're trying to hold off the Uruk-hai. They're trying to defend their people. So it's not just about like the battle itself, but it's about survival of the Rohirrim in a way. Also
Yeah.
protecting the leaders, so like protecting the king is another big objective that's going
Yeah.
on. The terrain, so that there's weaknesses of the fortress that they've tried to prepare for, but they haven't been completely successful. And some of those areas succeed, and some areas them fail. And you can see that as I zoom in. They hold the gate for a certain amount of time, and then eventually things give in. But maybe if they hadn't all those individual small bits worked out so well for that party, then maybe they wouldn't have survived long enough for Gandalf to
Yeah.
turn up with the reinforcements. So I think that's a really really great scene, and if you can pull off that in a game, then kudos to you. No emails except on party business. and comment suggestions and questions to thefellowshipphase@gmail.com. The long year turns to its close. Much we have accomplished these last seasons. Our fellowship disbands, but is not broken, and we will return
on the next episode of The Fellowship Phase.